Hello and welcome to the Alpha Edge Podcast, the show for men over 50 who refuse to fade out, slow down, play small, or settle for average. I'm your host, Kevin English. I'm a healthy aging expert, coach, and founder of the Alpha Edge, and I am here to help you get and stay strong in every dimension of your life, physically, mentally, emotionally, morally, and spiritually. You're here because you're ready to reclaim your power, to own your masculinity, and lead your life with strength and purpose. If you're ready to sharpen your edge, revive your drive, and lead like a man who's built for more, you're in the right place. All right, men, let's get after it. Gentlemen, welcome back to the Alpha Edge Podcast. So today we're going to dive into a conversation that hits right at the heart of what this show is all about, and that is winning in the second half of life as a man. So my guest today is Dr. Kenneth Rowe. Dr. Rowe is a double board certified physician who has treated more than 170,000 patients over a 35-year career in the ER. And after decades on the front lines of modern medicine, Dr. Rowe began asking a deeper question. Why are so many of us guys in midlife successful on the outside, but quietly eroding on the inside? That question led him to his own transformations and ultimately to the creation of what he calls the Reclaim Method. This is a framework designed to help guys restore their vitality, rebuild their identity, and rediscover their purpose in the second half of life. Dr. Rowe is the author of the book titled Prime: How to Win in the Second Half of Life, where he reframes midlife not as a slow decline, but as a powerful second ascension. So in this conversation, you're going to hear us talk about why so many men slowly drift into fatigue and burnout and loss of purpose, the massive gap between sick care and true health care, why your environment and brotherhood matter way more than your willpower, and how men can reclaim their strength, their health, and their mission as they move into the second half of life. If you are a man who refuses to accept the narrative that it's all downhill after 50, you're going to love this one. So without further ado, let's meet Dr. Ken Rowe.
So I'm an ER doctor. I've been doing it for 35 years. I've gone through my own transformation as well. And then there was a time, obviously early in my career, I was just a certain way, successful on the outside, but very eroding on the inside. But it was happening very slowly. You know, obviously it's a high stress job. I just decided to kind of power through and set an example by being the strong, silent type. Led to a couple of health situations, injured my shoulder, my back, surgeries, and long layoff times. And it was that time. It was in kind of the about 2015 or so. I was able to kind of step back from my career because I had to. I was recovering from a back surgery, my second one. I just became a different person with all that stress that was just taken off of my soul. I became very introspective. I got closer to my wife. I became more spiritual. And I was just like, wow, you know, I really like the way this feels. And I was able to kind of reflect, you know, do some research. Just I had some time to read. So I read The Plant Paradox by Dr. Gundry. And I was vegan at the time. So
okay, yeah,
you know,
right, yeah,
and feeling terrible, you know, just puffy. I wasn't as strong as I used to be, and just really not knowing why. My knees were inflamed. I found out it was mostly due to all this lectins, huge amount of lectins that I was eating. You know, everything that I was on his no eat list, I was eating in buckets. So I switched over, lost 15 pounds. Started running again, started just really getting my mojo back. It was just so refreshing. And I just kind of just had this epiphany during this transformation. I just said, as a physician, I never learned this stuff, you know, nutrition and certain other pathways and plants versus meat. Have I been part of this problem? Because I'm deeply embedded as being a physician. Have I been kind of propagating some of this lack of information, or because in the ER you're just going a certain way? I mean, you're dealing with emergencies, some non-emergencies, and it's very fulfilling. But as a whole, you know, I was able to kind of just step back and say, am I really helping people get healthy? And how much of the ER visit is preventable? How much of this was this heart attack, this stroke, something even maybe minor, like a minor indigestion or anything like that? How much of this is like an unforced error in lifestyle?
Lifestyle diseases. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
So,
all right. Yeah, I'm going to put a pin in that because I do want to come and pull apart the difference between healthcare, sick care, preventative care. We've got you here as an expert to help us on that. I want to back up a little bit because you said a couple of really interesting things here. So obviously we can imagine being an ER doc, that's got to be really intense, right? So you mentioned you're this really high functioning guy. Everything's looking great on the outside, got the career, the family, probably the things that go with that, right? But what words did you say? You said I was eroding on the inside. And then later you said I felt like I was losing my mojo. Where did that come from? What was that? I'm sure you've done some reflection, just given what you've just told us on that. Would you lump that in with a midlife crisis, or what was going on there? And how, I guess just as importantly, how did you come upon that realization? What did you do?
I think it was a combination of things. It was just being able to be off work and then have that reflection, because you're talking about 12-hour shifts, night shifts, day shifts, accumulated stress. And I really didn't. You get to a certain point where you get used to it and it becomes the norm. So, I think that happens in all of our lives. We do get older. We're not 20 years old anymore, but the eroding happens so insidiously and so slowly that you don't really notice it. You just kind of think it's your new normal. And then you get 40, you hit 50, you hit 60, and then the floor is just going lower and lower along with the ceiling. And you're just kind of accepting it, because you don't really have any other either mentors or somebody maybe a lot older than you that can kind of say, something, or a good role model. Maybe this decline, decreased energy, decreased strength can be turned around and managed. Let me tell you something, Kevin. It was when I was in medical school back in the 80s, so I'm aging myself a little bit,
Yeah.
we were taught, and this is the way we were taught, is that by the age of 30, you are in physical and mental decline at that point. At the age of 30, senolytics start taking over, creeping up. You're just deteriorating. You can't teach an old dog, new tricks. Your brain is a certain amount of size, and then after the age of 30, it will deteriorate in a very linear, predictable manner. So there's really nothing you can do about it. So you take that fatalistically and you just kind of say, well, what's the message? I'm gonna party till I'm 30, and then after 30, I'm just kind of gonna let it slide, right?
Yeah.
And this is what we were taught in medical school, and this is the philosophy and the mindset that we took into our careers. Now, it was only much later that we learned about neuroplasticity, and we learned about how your brain actually gets smarter in a lot of different ways. And we also learned the magnificent ways that your body can adapt. One of my idols when I was growing up was Jack LaLanne. To me, he didn't represent, oh God, this guy's just an outlier. There's no way. He's just from somewhere else. But to me, he really represented the human spirit that said, you can take a label, put an age label on me, and I'm going to break that apart. You're going to say, I can't do that when I'm the age of 70. And, he's pulling a boat with his teeth across the harbor at the age of 70. And then, he lived until mid-90s. I mean, just a tremendous guy. And if you watch like his old shows, he was just so, enthusiastic about life. He had such a zest. It just jumped off the screen. And I was like, that was my mentor. That was my idol. That's when I get to be old, that's what I want to aspire to be. So I think a lot of that is, getting really good mentorship, fellowship, and kind of teaming up with other guys and saying, hey, we can do this. It doesn't have to be pulling a ship at the age of 70, but we can do that extra, name whatever you want to, either in the gym, a tough conversation, maybe a little bit more time with your loved ones. You can make that decision. And that's completely, the beauty of it is that that's completely your choice and your free will. I mean, that's the way we were wired to have free will and have our choices directed based on our choices today. So that's kind of the backdrop.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. You had mentioned that, it seems like the floor and the ceiling both are lowering slowly insidiously, imperceptibly over time. And I think as men, sometimes we just buy into that. I can remember in probably my mid 40s, I was as sick and as unhealthy as I've ever been. I had a big health scare, and that's kind of what turned everything around. That's why I'm doing what I do today. But I can remember looking around at my peer group at the time, and we all had beer bellies. We all were, just had this fatalistic, oh, it sucks getting old kind of attitude. And that was my worldview. That was my mindset. Like you said, hey, if I'd had mentors or a group of men that were around me that were healthy and vibrant and saying, no, it doesn't. It's wonderful getting old. I've got all this. Now I have this life experience and wisdom that I didn't have when I was in my stupid 20s, right? Doing dumb things. So yeah, I absolutely love that. And I think you talk about in your book, you talk about the second ascension and how our identity kind of can change over time. So obviously on this podcast, we'll talk about all the time. Look, guys, there is no reason you can't be as strong and fit and healthy and driven, purpose-driven. The ceiling's not down here; it's up here, right? But how do you get a guy to get out of that mindset, that fatalistic mindset, and wake up? I think, is it fair to say that we're not going to get there alone? That kind of that lone wolf mentality that was certainly me for a lot of my life. Right now, I realize I'm better in a pack than I am as a lone wolf.
Yeah,
is that
absolutely.
Fair?
That's very fair. I mean, we've looked at the studies, right? I mean, most of the longitudinal studies show shockingly that you are pretty much the median and the sum of the 5 people closest to you. So, right. I mean, if you've got guys drinking beer, partying on the weekend, dad bod, beer belly, just kind of saying, oh, the heck with it. My dad died when I was 60, or whatever the justifications are for not wanting to tune up your body and your mind. You're given this great gift. And so it's just like you don't want to waste what your potential is, or you just don't want to waste whatever time you have into something that's not going to get you to who you need to be. And so, and one big point is, just like you talk about in your podcast, I mean, this is an active process. I mean, aging is definitely happening. We're all getting older, but you have to do something about it. It's an active process that you really have to create your environment, plan, support group, and, trying to do it by yourself. That's what gets you in trouble. Because when you try to isolate, and a lot of times that's certainly what happened to me. You're strong, silent, stiff upper lip, stoic. Yep. That equates to strength. If you talk about your feelings, or if you talk about really anything, that equates to weakness. And so that your man card gets taken away from you.
Yeah.
So, but the complete opposite is actually true. If you really want to thrive, and if you really want to come into yourself, a lot of it is that, wouldn't it be nice, our phones, we have automatic updates to our operating systems, right? Just to turn it off when you're sleeping, plug it in, and then you wake up, it's all like, it's upgraded, it's faster, it's more nimble. But we as human beings, we don't upgrade our operating system unless there's a lot of work, a lot of thought that goes into it. And essentially, a lot of us are running on puberty, young adulthood. I don't say that in like a, hey, chasing women kind of way, because that's certainly part of it, but that's part of the mindset. You're hustling, you're trying to accumulate, you're trying to become successful. So then there's that kind of alpha male mindset, which is different than alpha lion, of course, but you use that, and that becomes who you are. And then everything that you do either supports that or doesn't support that. And so you really get stuck into that in your 20s. And guess what? You're in your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, and your 60s, and you've never, I don't want to say you've never grown up, but you've never updated that operating system. And unfortunately, we see that play out in public and time again with guys in their 40s and 50s and 60s. And they all say, well, yeah, I should have known better, but, this is what happened. And it really shouldn't be that way.
No, yeah, I'm with you 100%. So I see it all the time. And, it's kind of a little bit of a Peter Pan syndrome. And certainly I think culture kind of encourages that. But I think when I look at that, what I see is kind of that warrior energy. And look, to be fair, I've got warrior energy in me. I'm 61. I still, that warrior energy comes out in places, hopefully where it's appropriate. But I want to be conscious of transitioning into my king energy, this stewardship energy. And then I'm looking forward to transitioning into this more elder energy. So just this maturation, or this natural rising of the spirit, right? As I grow, because like you said, nobody's going to defeat aging. We all have the same end, but we have a big say in how we age. And I think that you and I were talking right before we hit record here that one of the things I see most commonly in guys in this age demographic is just this sort of lost drifting. They don't know what they stand for. They don't have a code. They don't have a mission statement. They don't have a purpose. They don't know what they stand strongly for and what they stand strongly against. Again, I think culture just really encourages that anything means anything sort of philosophy. And it's tough, isn't it, for a guy to, especially if he's not in an environment around men who are embracing their true spiritual masculinity and their true capacity and potential, and are seeking to, they know their purpose, they know why they're here. And I think that what that leaves us with is a bunch of men that grew up probably with that stoic, stiff upper lip, John Wayne kind of idea of masculinity. Oh, yeah. And then culture's made this drastic shift, and we're sort of left unmoored, untethered, and lost. And I find a lot of guys in that space. Does that resonate with you? Do you see, when you're working with men, do you kind of see men in that state today?
That completely resonates with me. I think it's just flat out confusion. Yeah. You get all these terms thrown at you, and just some of the words, just when you read it on the surface, it's just very damaging for processing your own ego and what you should do in the world. Because, you can have toxic masculinity, and you can be at the workplace and literally you're just on pins and needles. I mean, you don't even want to talk to a woman or give a compliment or to anybody. And it's just kind of like, you're not being encouraged to be yourself with the guises of good manners, right, and consideration. And, when a man gets to a situation where he doesn't know how to react or how to act, or he's, men or women, of course, sure, what does he or she want me to say? How should I? Then that's where you start losing authenticity, and that's where you start losing that energy that should come from the inside of your soul and just radiate outwards.
Yes, sir.
Inside, you should say, okay, I'm a good person. I'm a wonderful soul. I was put here for a reason. I'm not perfect, but I shouldn't be hesitant to interact and talk with my fellow human beings because of some sort of constraints in culture or some other things that are talked about on social media, or fill in your blank. I mean, everybody knows there's a line that, it doesn't take a lot of common sense. It's very simple. You don't cross this line. It's okay to be friendly. It's okay to be kind. It's okay to reach out to somebody else. It's okay to bring the energy of the room that you're in to a place where people feel safe, supported, and they feel good about themselves. So there's nothing wrong with speaking out and making people feel good about themselves. Sincere compliments go a long way. Positive energy goes a long way. But men get stuck because of culture pressures. They also get stuck because they're still in that operating system. Yeah. So they're still trying to hustle and generate and accumulate. And then, they're in this situation where it might not be enough because you're always hammered with worst case scenario and apocalypse situations, and you're not going to have enough money for retirement because, you're going to live longer, maybe, but you're going to live sicker. Mm-hmm. And one thing, Kevin, I got to say that the medical profession is not geared to take care of this. They're not geared to take care of the midlife. We call it a midlife crisis. We've relegated it to basically, I won't say a joke, but it's like, you just minimized and kind of gaslighted this to where it's like, hey, you don't want to be like that. You got to accept that you're going to have some decline. We're geared to kids, 18 and younger, and we're also older adults, 65 and older. We're almost there in a few years. That's just from a financial and a pure reimbursement model.
Right.
But from 18 to 65, you're kind of on your own. The in medicine, we have this, we're triaging everybody, right? Even if you're just in your family practitioner's office, it's kind of like, Kevin comes in, he's providing, man. He's still working, he's still providing, he's still very functional. So you put on that bias and go, yeah, he's really not that sick. Let me let me put more time and resources into someone that is going to need some surgery, or God forbid has cancer, or has some other acute complication of a chronic disease. And then so what happens, you're just kind of left to your own devices. You're not sick enough to be treated. So that's why I just cringe when I hear about pre-hypertension or pre-diabetes.
Yeah.
I mean, what is that? I mean, so we're a threshold based system where we're looking at numbers before we're going to say, well, we need to treat this because it's above a certain number. Well, that number it's not a static number. And why would you want to treat something later when it becomes a problem? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. It's kind of like if you took a stage 1 cancer and just said, well, I'm going to wait for it to turn to stage 3 before we do anything about it. You would not do that.
Right.
And it is crazy. I wanted to also make a point too, but in the 80s, I'm an 80s guy, right? But preventive medicine was a viable, pretty popular specialty. And docs weren't making that much money unless they were in like especially in surgeries and that kind of stuff. So everybody, I mean, I strongly considered it. I was like, yeah, this is nice. This is actually helping people. So I had that mindset back then. But over time, you don't hear anything about preventive medicine, even though that's basically the gist of lifetime, integrative, obesity, longevity, precision. Now it's splintered into all these different fields that pretty much have kind of the same thing in mind. That's health span, being healthy for your age, not necessarily the quest to live longer, but just to live well as long as you can.
Yeah.
But I think in a good thing, it's getting more people involved. I think I can see the younger generation, the younger doctors are doing more holistic, thinking about the body as a whole, doing more follow-ups, doing some precision medicine. And of course, AI is here, so that can be helpful in that regards, kind of consolidating all the medical information and just trying to figure out what might be the best game plan. But we went from an era where we were actually looking at preventing diseases, but the financial model for healthcare just said that's not going to fly. Yeah. We're not going to make any money here. So that's kind of, and so I wanted to just pass that along to your audience and to anybody else who might be listening, that because of that, it's kind of left you in no man's land.
It has.
You just can't go to your doctor and get that kind of support from the doctor, and he or she is just not going to be able to follow you up over a better time frame. Here's your annual visit. See you later.
Right.
You want a rectal exam? No, I don't want one. Okay. So you end up getting like former President Biden coming up with stage 4 prostate cancer. That should never happen. I mean, that's such a tragedy. That sort of thing is just what really, it really starts ripping my gut, because I go, yeah, we need to help people, and we need to, if we're going to diagnose things, that's great. If we're going to work on, ICD-10s and diagnoses, then that's the language we're going to use. But let's do it in a time frame that can really make an impact and help people, rather than waiting for them to present with a chronic disease. But we're changing that. We're changing that. I think the population is demanding that we change that, because people don't want to wait to get sicker. People want to be proactive. And now they're getting very wise, and they're using AI themselves. And so they're going to come up to us doctors and start asking us all these specific questions. And we need to be on top of it and say, this is what we recommend, and this is what we should do for you. Here's what's best for you, rather than, it's a numbers game, 15-minute visits and appointments, and you're just kind of churning things out, and the head's just swimming because he or she's just like, man, this it's a busy day, but I got 30 more patients to see tomorrow. It just doesn't give the medical system enough time to really promote healthcare the way that it should be. And but we're trying to change that.
Yes. Okay. So I want to spend a minute here because this is fascinating to me. So it seems to me that traditional medical care, sick care is really what it is exactly what you were describing, right? I go in, I either am within this reference range of quote unquote okay, or I'm out of range, in which case the treatment is pretty simple, prescription. I'm getting a medicine probably, or maybe a surgery, it depends. But it seems to me that kind of healthcare is basically, okay, is Kevin sick? Then treat and follow up. If not, then go and come back, do your blood if you're in. And those reference ranges, like you said, A, they're moving, and B, they have nothing to do with my optimal health. I have gone from in my 40s to not thinking about, if I wasn't sick, then I was healthy, right? But it turns out there's this spectrum between being very sick and being optimally healthy. And as I became more interested in that, I found that, okay, so traditional medicine's not going to help me because I don't care, right? That doctor, like you said, he's got 30 patients right after me. My blood work comes back. It looks fantastic. Okay, Kev, keep doing what you're doing. I'll see you next year. That's it. That's what I get. As opposed to, hey, what are your goals? What do you want? What are you trying to do? If we did this at any rate. But you had mentioned precision medicine, personalized medicine. There's functional health practitioners now. It seems to me that people are starting to wake up to, okay, I want to get not sick. And all these metabolic diseases, all these lifestyle diseases, the diabetes and the high blood pressure and the high cholesterol, the obesity, all that. I want to be the CEO of my own health. I want to take radical responsibility for myself and not put that off on the medical community. And then I want to start to seek out people like you, people who are going to help me not just be not sick, because that should be the table stakes for all humans, but I want to be optimally healthy. And that's a different conversation altogether, isn't it? And I think that this idea, I'm optimistic because people like you are out there saying, okay, well, personalized medicine or precision medicine, because what's right for my optimal health maybe isn't the same. It's less easy to do a blanket statement like, okay, your cholesterol's high, take the statin. That's pretty easy fix, right? Whereas, do you want to explain a little bit about that? About when you say precision medicine, what are you talking about?
Well, I'm talking about gathering the data that matters. So precision medicine, a couple of things. So we see an inordinate amount of people that pass away from cerebral aneurysms, right? I mean, these people have family histories, young people, and that would have been completely averted had they known that they had a cerebral aneurysm. So, but we only offer an MRI when people have sick symptoms, maybe when they're older. So, a lot of the precision medicine models are offering full body MRIs. It's just kind of a starting data point. I think it's a great idea. Just the more data, the better. Now, you can get really down in the weeds about some things that are just in the big, at the cellular level, it might be helpful. But I mean, if you're not fixed, the body is just not a bunch of cells with a couple of reactions here and there. A body is so interconnected, not only within itself, but also to the outside environment, that you have to really start looking at everything from head to toe. But the panels that we get, blood counts and the comprehensive metabolic panel, maybe a lipid panel, some thyroid functions, and an occasional testosterone. That's it. I mean, that is really your standard primary care panel. And there's just so many other things that create inflammation, chronic inflammation. There's microbiome testing. There's food inflammation testing that, I mean, everybody takes these blanket diets and it's great, but it might not be great for you. But yeah, it's just about getting the right kind of data and then following up and then being able to, like you said, be a guide for someone's health. Physicians aren't really positioned in our model to do that. So that's why you kind of, it's nice to have somebody who can guide you through this process over a couple of weeks, couple of months, 6 months, rather than once a year,
Yeah.
because we need to know the trend. You have a snapshot of what happened one day. I have no idea if your pre-diabetes is actually diabetes. You just might be cycling through what kind of diet is really best for me. What are the foods that I'm inflammatory to, and which foods am I not inflammatory to? Very important. And that sneaky inflammation, and then also there's just so much that's going on in the intestines and the gut. I mean,
Yeah.
that is just another discussion amongst itself, because it's just so much, there's so much nuance there. But there are some basic gut barrier tests that you can take to make sure that the gut barrier exactly is intact, which is very helpful. But it's a deep dive, yes. But what it is, it's just empowering. Like when you said, become the CEO of your own body. Okay, so how are you going to do that? A CEO is going to have people that report to him, is going to have data, is going to have monthly, quarterly, weekly, monthly, quarterly reports. And I mean, literally, you do more maintenance on your car than you do on your body.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It's
So,
crazy.
yeah, I mean, it's just like maybe picturing the food pyramid. We're putting health way at the very top, and where it should be really on the bottom, because it's foundational for everything else. I mean, mental and physical health, you can't separate the two. And that's what really, really kind of is another pet peeve of mine. You're not healthy on the inside, then of course your brain's not going to be healthy, and then vice versa. Everybody wants to separate this. You're
Yeah.
just
Yes, they do.
there's
Yeah.
no separation. I mean, it's
Right.
just
I'm with
elegantly
you.
interconnected.
Hmm.
So those are kind of the constraints that men face. And but yeah, I would, if I had a recommendation, seek out someone who looks at you and just kind of looks at the latest, the cutting edge science, but can kind of consolidate all the science into something that makes sense for you. There are some, like you said, it's a spectrum.
Yeah.
There are some docs that'll be like, all right, we're gonna test for all this, and it's overwhelming, because how are you going to make all these changes with the best intentions,
Hmm.
versus someone who's just kind of going to be very pragmatic and even more precise, because you're creating a program just for you, your own uniqueness. There's only been one you in the history of the world, and will only be one you in the history of this entire world.
Yeah.
And so you have your own special biology, your own special thought processes, and that needs to be taken into consideration.
It does, and that's the part of all of this that gives me hope. I think that there, like you said, there's more awareness around that. There are more medical practitioners seeing that there's a need here. There's a that are coming in to fill that. So I think also just culturally, politically, there are more conversations in that space than there was. At least to me, seems so in the past. But Dr. Roy, I think this is a perfect place here for us to transition a little bit. In your book, you talk about this reclaim method, this kind of idea of, hey, let's use this reclaim method to win back the second half of our life. So what I thought it would be kind of fun. Reclaim is an acronym. You've got the R
Right.
for reveal the root, et cetera, et cetera. Let's go through each of these briefly here and kind of tell guys, because I think this is a really good roadmap for how we might, in fact, reclaim the second half of our life. So start with that R, reveal the root. What do you mean by that? What is that?
All right. So that starts at the front, because it is the first thing that we check. So reveal the root is root causes. So that's where we kind of gather data. That's where we do kind of the extra layer of testing to take a look at what kind of inflammation you might be having, what foods or drinks might be causing that. We investigate some hormonal pathways. There's some, hormonal functional assays that are very helpful, particularly for guys. It's not all about one testosterone level. And we go a lot deeper than you would get in your normal annual physical exam. That's where we're gathering data. And then also that's where you're, doing you're gathering your own data. You're checking your body composition. You're keeping a food journal. You're being very
Yeah.
mindful of your health in this step. And a lot of times it's amazing. I mean, a lot of the guys at that point are just, that's when they've decided to see me, which is a first step. But when they actually start self-evaluating, self-assessing, and then they're writing it down and then reporting it back to me, that's when they have literally, Kevin, and they'll have that self-aware. Oh, Dr. Rowe, I didn't even realize I was eating this at
Oh
this
yeah.
time. It was totally
Yeah.
mindless. They already come. They just needed that nudge, and
Yeah.
so they already come with that information. And they say, "Oh, I already know what I need to do about this." And we have these great conversations where they're doing 80% of the talking. I'm just kind of listening, going, yeah, you're really sorting this out for yourself, aren't you? And that's to me that like incredibly refreshing. The energy that you get just from the first step, the R in the reclaim, is just incredible. It's like,
Let's bring some
other
awareness
than,
to this. Let's
yeah,
shed some light on this. 100%. Yeah, I
yeah,
love it. You got to start there, right, with that
you
basic
you
awareness.
do.
What you're
It's
doing. Yeah.
great. It's a great
Yeah.
spark, and it's just great to see my patients, my gentlemen's faces light up at this stage, and
Sure.
it's very fulfilling, gratifying.
And there's some simple things everybody can do at home right now, even before you get to your doctor. You had mentioned food logs, MyFitnessPal or Chronometer. There's a ton of food tracking apps. If you've never done that before, that's a really good place to start. We've got Aura Rings and Fitbits and Apple Watches that spit out all kinds of information. We got smart scales, just tons of information that we can just start to track, right? To kind of reveal the root here. Let's get, like you said, a CEO he has all the metrics. He's got a CFO and a COO, and they have responsibilities, but they are funneling up numbers and facts so that I can see what's actually happening. That's going to be able to allow me to dictate where I go from here.
Absolutely.
All right. So we got E. That's going to be evaluate some lifestyle drivers here. What are we looking for in this step?
Okay, so one of the big things that we're looking at is sleep. It's Sleep Awareness Month next month in March.
Every
And
month, Dr. Rose.
should be every
every
month.
month.
I
That's right. It should be.
completely agree.
But anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
But yeah, it's just one of those things where you have to understand what sleep does for your body. I think it's one of those things because you're unconscious, you just kind of put it on the back burner. I mean, it's like you think everything in life happens while you're awake. Well, that couldn't be more false than that. I mean, I would argue that there are more things that happen while you're sleeping than while you're awake because you have recovery, you have hormones, you have this cleansing, you have consolidation of memories. You have so many things that are going on. And isn't it beautiful that you don't have to even think about all these things? Right. Isn't it beautiful that, you've been created to have this incredible body that does this for you? So one thing is just because you're in bed, that doesn't tell you how much sleep you actually got. Everybody is, well, I got in bed about 11, I woke up around 6 or 7 or whatever time. I think that's enough. And then once again, it's very insidious. Over time, you're actually sleep deprived, maybe even subclinical or clinical sleep apnea. You're not going to know. You just know you feel tired, but you can't really hear yourself snoring, right? Because you're sleeping. So I think sleep is one of the foundational pillars of health and should be really planned, tracked, and understood more than anything else. I mean, it's just, your brain cells get smaller while you're sleeping, so the lymphatic system can clear out any of the extra neurotransmitters and toxins in your brain. So we're finding out evidence that is decreasing the risk for neurodegenerative diseases and Alzheimer's. So,
Yeah.
Sleep deprivation, it's like, and you just know there's one day you're sleep deprived, just one day. And then how do you feel the next day?
Yeah.
Oh, it's tough. Just
It is.
you traveled, maybe some jet lag. It's just going to be a rough day. Well, I would surmise, why don't you stack up a little bit of that, maybe not that dramatic, but every night for the past 5, 10, 15, 20 years, what kind of damage is that causing to your body, or what kind of break is it causing or sealing for you to really bust out and be energetic and have that vitality? It makes a huge difference. We're also talking about, exercise, sunlight, getting outside, getting in the environment as well. But since we're on your podcast or I'm on your podcast and and it's Sleep Awareness Month, I wanted to really put an emphasis on sleep because it is just, you know, here's the guy thing, right? I can sleep when I'm dead.
Sleep when I'm dead. Warren Zevon said it. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's just like, and you kind of just, it becomes like a badge of honor. It's like, oh man, I only need like 4 hours of sleep. It's no big deal. Yep. But if we're talking to men, then, you got to ask yourself, what really turned around LeBron James and Roger Federer? How are they able to perform at the ages that they did? Basically, they just got more sleep. They prioritized recovery. And guess what, guys? All that good stuff that goes on in your body, it doesn't happen while you're working out.
That's right.
All the magic happens when you're sleeping. And if you're getting quality sleep, and obviously if you're not getting quality sleep, your workouts aren't going to be as good. And it's just going to be a downward negative spiral. Your workouts aren't going to be as good, so your sleep's not going to be as good. And, then you're just kind of shrinking up again. But so important and just so misunderstood because you're not really thinking about it because that's what the crux is. You're sleeping. So you're unconscious, but what is the quality of your sleep? You have to really track it first. It's very, very important. Yeah. So get that Oura Ring or get that Whoop or hook it up on your Apple Watch or whatever you have. They even have some beds that have their own sleep metrics that are embedded in it. So
that's right.
There's really no excuse. It's not expensive, and it can be very, very enlightening.
Sure. Yeah. I personally, I'm an Oura Ring wearer. I track
too.
I track my deep sleep, my REM, my total sleep, the latency, all the fun stuff. I'd love to nerd out on that. What I really like is my week over week trending of that. But Dr. Rowe, I can tell you personally, I went from just basically a horrible sleeper, just insomniac, to really focusing on sleep. And it was, to say it's life-changing was just to diminish the effect it had on my overall health and well-being. And like you said, we can all anecdotally think about, I got a really crappy night's sleep. Maybe I was traveling. I made different food choices. I skipped my workout. I was snappy with coworkers or loved ones, all from just one night of crappy sleep. Now, take just, like you said, a decade of suboptimal sleep, and you've got a suboptimal man operating there. So yeah, I love that we went there and spent a little extra time there. All right, that's R, that's EC. Okay, here's a good one. We want to certainly correct. What are we correcting here?
Well, this is where we look at the data and then we intelligently correct it and not overcorrect it either. There's a right way. So we're talking about hormonal imbalances. Yep. We're talking about electrolytes, nutrients, minerals. It's very interesting. We talk about, so we're going to talk about testosterone. Obviously, that is something that could be another master class or another discussion in and of itself. Yeah. Again, a lot of nuance. A lot of guys don't really understand it. It's just like they just look at a number and, that number is wildly fluctuating throughout the day. And there's some other parameters in the bloodstream that create, and then there's some other metabolites of testosterone, including estrogen, that you can break down even further that kind of delineates how much the testosterone system means. Testosterone is very important. No doubt about it. I mean, if, us guys, we have a certain amount, it might get lower, might get higher. Our ladies are just, they burn out their estrogen all within a few months. Can you imagine if that happened to us guys? My God, it would just be, the world would be a horrible place to live in.
Yes,
everybody just no testosterone at, all of a sudden over a few months when you're in your 40s. Oh man, just that would not be good. But there's a lot of nuance to it. There's a lot of nuance to replacement. I think we're getting a lot better at it. And I think we're taking it out of the purview of kind of a specialist, because before it was only a urologist where you could get your testosterone from. And now I think everyone is kind of more aware, or kind of the people who should be more aware, the people that are going to track it and really intelligently look at it. But there are a lot of other different things that we might glean from the testing that would be very relevant. Something like a low magnesium, which is just something, and this is what happens in the body. We check blood tests. Well, guess what? 99% of the magnesium in your body is not in your blood. It's in your tissues. It's in
Yeah.
your ATP as a cofactor. It's in your mitochondria. So it's incredibly important, but very underdiagnosed and only checked with a blood test. You can check it in your red blood cells. That might be a better parameter, but still not perfect. So there are a lot of other things that can lead to, say, a functional B12 deficiency. Say you're one of these guys that say, well, over-the-counter meds, I'm not really going to count that. Wait a minute. I've been taking Pepcid and Prilosec for my heartburn because, I just take it with my coffee because my coffee gives me heartburn. I
Yeah.
hear that so many times. Well, how long's that been going on for? Well, for like 20 years. So all of a sudden you're B12 deficient because your stomach acid has been suppressed for so long that it'll affect your B12 levels, even if your B12 serum levels are technically normal. So, those sort of things. But there are a lot of, I mean, there are about 20 different things that
Yeah.
we can probably look at. But it's just like you take the R, you get the data, and C is where you're going to kind of come together, come up with a game plan, coalesce everything in a meaningful and a very precise way. And then that's when you can start making a difference. It's going to be slow.
Right.
I
That's a
tell
good point. Right.
I
Yeah.
tell my patients, it's
we all
like,
want results dramatically tomorrow, right? But
yeah.
Doesn't
It's
work
like,
that
hey,
way typically. Yeah.
no, it doesn't.
Yeah.
But it's nice because you feel like you got the momentum. You feel like you have agency. So you
Right.
feel like you're heading
Yeah.
in the right direction. And that's extremely powerful. So this is the stage where my patients will go, okay, it's all coming together. You're starting to lose a little bit of weight. You're starting to feel a little more energetic. You've got less brain fog. You're sleeping a little bit better because you're looking at it. So we're talking about, again, the reclaim method should also be, somewhat like a sloped that way. You start gathering data and then over time, and then there comes that inflection point where you're just like, wow,
Yeah.
this is really working.
Right on. All right. So obviously we've got to shore up any imbalances, right?
Yes.
But then from there, we're going to go to L, and I love this. I love the wording here. We're going to level up, right? How are we leveling up? I think that should be pretty obvious to most guys
Yes.
listening to the REC, but L is level up, right?
Yep. Yep. Here we're talking about like a lot of different things. We're talking about, we will touch on mitochondria, because I think that's just something that should be part of I don't want to say jargon, but it just should be in everybody's conscience. These guys are important, and how do we support them? How do we best support them? And then we're just talking about an intelligent exercise plan. Here's another pet peeve of mine. This is right up your alley too. It's just diet and exercise. Okay, great. So we're not saying anything about a specific diet, and we're really not saying anything about a specific exercise.
Right.
We're just talking about, well, the ACE recommends 150 minutes of moderate physical activity per week, and you're just like,
Pretty generic. Yeah.
very, very generic,
Yeah.
no specifics. And then you get caught in the weeds about zone 2
Right.
and zone 5. And it's just like,
Yep.
guys, here's kind of what makes it a little bit more straightforward and easier. Now there are more studies that talk about, kind of the more things you do because you're neurologically firing off other parts of your body. So if you're like a multi-activity person, you do some biking, you do some yoga, you do some tennis, you do some walking, and then you kind of supplement that with some weight training and some sprints. It doesn't have to be anything that's just like power lifter, Arnold Schwarzenegger type stuff.
Right. Right.
And it's like, and with the muscle, it's just, there's so many things that go on to it. If you're trying to retrain, it's about the balance and the neural training before it is a muscle training. It's the nervous system that'll adjust before the muscle, and it's the tendons that'll adjust, a little bit after the muscle, and then it's the fascia that kind of puts it all together. So you really have to kind of look at everything in totality. You can't just say, well, yeah, I'm just going to put on some muscle and I'm going to eat this protein and I'm going to get my testosterone back on track.
Jacked up. Yeah.
And I'm going to get all jacked up and look great. It's like, okay, yeah. So now you're just going to get an injury, and that's just going to set you back. You got to do this very intelligently. You got to be smart about it. So, you're working out your tendons, you're doing isometrics, you're building a foundation, which includes like good old calf raises and your soleus muscle and your ankles. You're addressing those weak spots in your body. Yes, you do have to do some core before you go busting out and saying, oh, well, let me go bench press. And once again, bench press, you shouldn't really do that after the age of 50. That's just very tough on your shoulders. But, there's some other things we can do with cables. And now we have all these machines, tonal and oxyfit, that'll integrate eccentric load and, also replicate inverted chains. Great. I mean, it's just, it becomes fun. And then they also gamify it too, where you're just like, instead of a ski erg, you're just like watching a screen acting like you're skiing downhill.
Yeah.
So that's very helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because the ski erg is a killer, man. It's just like,
oh yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I love it, but it's just,
spent some time on there. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Hammer those things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love it. But yeah, but to your point here, for the guy who's very deconditioned and is just now starting to reclaim the second half of his life, it's probably a bad idea for him to throw whatever on the bench press barbell that he benched in college and just have at it, right? And drink,
absolutely,
like you said, and chug down some protein powder. That's probably going to be that's a recipe for a setback. But there is a way to just start slowly, safely. Let's work on our mobility, because that's probably gotten pretty crappy. Let's work on some core strength. Let's work on these and work up to it. And look, if you want to be strong in lifts, then be strong in lifts. But I think there's a safe way and a smart way to go about that. And there's a really dumb way to go about that as well.
Absolutely.
All right, I'm looking through this reclaim here, and I love how it flows, because we just talked about, hey, we're gonna reveal the root, we're gonna evaluate these lifestyle drivers, we're gonna connect all our hormonal and metabolic imbalances, we're gonna level up all these lifestyle things, then we're gonna activate, right? So it seems like all of this is just flowing together, one step just building on the next. So what do you mean by activate? What are we activating here?
Well, we're going to talk about activating systems. But we're activating mitochondria. We're also activating something deep inside of you that you've kind of lost over time, or it's diminished over time. And the activation kind of goes into the I part of it as well, which is identity. So I know this is something that you're very, very well versed on. You're not going to sustain something if you don't really believe that that's the person you are. If you're going to find that, you're going to default to that excuse, and you're just going to say, I'm not really, oh man, I don't really feel like going to the gym again, as opposed to you become an identity that says, I'm a guy that doesn't miss workouts.
Right.
There's a huge difference. So
there is.
You get to the point where you get so much momentum where it's like, okay, if I miss a workout, I'm going to feel terrible. I'm not going to beat myself up too much, but let's get after it the next day. Okay, let's do something. So that's what we're talking about, activation. This is a step where we've taken the information, we can proceed in a pragmatic, intelligent manner with the data that we have, and then now we can just start really getting into it. We can start wherever we can meet you, wherever you're at, obviously, and then start with a good game plan. Might include isometric exercises, just body weight. A hugely underrated tool that we have for tendon health and actually for building muscle as well. Joe Weider had it right long time ago.
Yeah.
And everybody just kind of laughed at it. Yeah, even Arnold was like, but it's like, hey, what do you do on stage? I mean, you're doing isometrics. I mean, you don't think you're, firing off your muscles or you're increasing your tendon strength? And even Arnold was like, yeah, it's probably right. So, but yeah, we're talking about just getting the information and just kind of putting you in action.
Putting you in action.
The activate is putting you in action, just getting things, and then getting the processes, getting the support, because it's going to be like, well, what are you doing? Are you working out at home? Are you working out in a gym? Are we going to do a video? And this is a lot, some of the guys, we do things together. We might do it through Zoom or through like a video conferences, but I have like one of my follow-up visits, I have like a walk and talk. It's like a walk and talk section. And it's like, for this hour, we're going to both be outside, and then we're going to talk about our game plan. And, if you're inside, you have to show it to me because, we're not going to, then we're going to have to reschedule it because, or if the weather's bad or something like that. But that sort of thing, let's get outside and get moving because a lot of times you just, I don't know, the way your thoughts just are so crystallized when you're moving. It's just, it's just a well-known phenomenon.
Love it. I love it. All right. So we've already hit on this a little bit, but the I in Reclaim is going to be your integrate mindset and identity. You're right. I love this space. I think it's, as guys, we don't give this as much credence as we should. Talk to us, because so far up to now, we're talking about all the things, right? The mitochondria and the hormones and the all the fun stuff here. To optimize our cellular biological energy systems. But here we're talking about now this new identity, right? This new mindset, this new purpose. Talk to us, how does that fit into all of the rest of the Reclaim?
Well, honestly, I think it's probably the most important part. And I think it's one of the things that kind of distinguishes me from other precision medicine physicians, because I'm really big on, if you can change the cells, you can change the metabolism, everything can look good. But if you don't really change, because of this, you've changed who you really are as a man. Now you're kinder, you think about your legacy, you're thinking more about mentorship, and this is where you think about passing things along. This is where you really become the person that you've really wanted to be, but life got in the way. So now we've taken away all the barriers. You've got that vitality. Now you've got, what do you want to do with that energy? You just want to keep it for yourself. You need to be able to pay it forward, and you need to be able to become a mentor and a role model for younger people and older people. I say, at this point you want to win the second half so you could help the younger generation win the first half and the second half, the whole game.
Yeah, I love
so
that.
Very important. And so the identity part of it, the identity engineering of the program is just a huge part. And I think, Kevin, it just falls naturally into, I feel better, I'm going to do better.
Yeah.
Because, who wants to be giving and compassionate when you're just down and tired and wired and you just don't really feel like it? You've run out of bandwidth. So this is the time, and it's usually about, it's a 6-month program. This is usually about the 4th month that we start really integrating this. To me, it's the most fun portion of this whole method. Like I said, I should probably make another one where it's, there's an inflection point and just, you're really going up. But this identity engineering is, and then you can go both ways with it. You can go future self, here's what I want to be in the future, and then reverse engineer to where you are now, and also look at your past and kind of go, am I still stuck in the past? Do I need to upgrade my operating system? So like the engineering part of it really, I think, resonates with most guys, because it's like we like to build things. We like to be architects. We like to fix things, and so I think this is what really separates the program. And it's probably my most enjoyable part of this whole program.
As you might guess, I absolutely love all of that. Look, behavior change is really, really difficult. So you take a deconditioned guy who's got potentially decades of poor health, self-care habits, right? And that change that we're asking him, hey, let's start exercising, let's start walking, let's sleep better, let's make healthier food choices that honor our body. That guy might be motivated. Say it's January 1st, new year, new me. I'm making this resolution. This is the year. Kids are finally out of the house. It's time for me to take care of myself. He's motivated. Well, that motivation is going to fade. All right, so now he's got to fall back on discipline. And if he's got a lot of grit, he's gonna suck it up for a while. But what I have found for just years of being a personal trainer and nutrition coach, that coming up with brilliant personalized nutrition plans or workout plans is easy. That's table stakes. Almost anybody can do it. I'm sure AI could probably do it better than I could. Yeah. The real difference is whether or not I can get that client to make that shift to this is who I am. This is my new identity. I'm the kind of person who makes healthy choices. I'm the kind of person who does what he says he's going to do. I'm the kind of guy who I know what my mission is. I know what my purpose is. And I walk it out every day, or I'm on that path. But I do think that just because behavior change is hard, I think motivation fails us. That's a very fickle friend, by the way. Discipline's, and look, I love motivation. I love being motivated. I love determination and grit and willpower. I think it's critical. But I think that if that's what you're going to rely on to change your behavior for the rest of your life, you're just setting yourself up for failure. It's not going to sustain you in the long run. Somewhere along that path, you have to fall in love with the process. And I'm not saying that's easy, but that's what I hear when I hear you talking about this integrating mindset, integrating this new identity, and how that's the fun part of this process, because everything we've talked up to now is kind of, it's medical and it's biological and it's systems and it's cells and nutrition and exercise. We get all that, but I think the real magic happens when that guy says, okay, this is who I'm becoming. This is the new identity. This is me, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what you like to see.
That's what you like to see. Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is too, even think about it this way, your body, when you have voluntary movement, your brain registers it after the movement. So it's helpful, right? You don't want to, if you have a predator back in the savannah days coming after you, you don't want to have to think about it, right? You're like, oh, should I move? Or just like, no, you just do the action, and then the feelings come later. So, and there is a lot of good data that just says, if you do small acts, if you just act your way into feeling rather than trying to feel like you're doing something and then you take the action, you just kind of flip it around. The action will create all these great feelings. And the opposite of that is the inaction is an action. Right. Yeah. And then that'll create a lot of different feelings as well. So, it's just one of those things. You got to get out. You got to get out and do it. Small actions lead to big things.
They sure do.
And I think that's part of it too, because you don't want to, if you try to do it all by yourself, that's when you're just going to talk yourself out of it. There's going to be some shame and guilt and just, what the heck, it's gone too far. Whereas if you're around somebody that can really be in a supportive system for you, where you're doing things together and it's kind of fun, and it doesn't have to be like intense, but it's just the joy of connecting, and the fact that joy is not something that's an end product. It should be the engine of what you're doing. So we get to that point, and that's the thing. You wake up every morning, and that's the miracle. Where we're looking for miracles. Well, I guarantee you, waking up in the morning is a miracle.
It sure is.
100%. So what are you going to do with that miracle? You're just going to wait for the next day and wait for another one? No, you've been given this. Let's go do something about it. It's that, and you get to that kind of energy, then a lot of good things can happen. But I just want to say that, hey guys, it's just, you and I both have felt the whole spectrum of emotions. We've been where you are. It's like, we don't want to do that. It's like, no, it's too, I'd rather do this. That's too hard. But you really get to the point where it's like, something, it's fun to actually do this, and I'll be missing something if I don't do it. And I feel just so much better. So, but obviously if you have an accountability friend or a good peer group, then it just makes it so much easier.
It does. There's that built-in accountability. There's that community. There's that brother that's going to kick you in the butt when you need it and give you a hand up when you need it. So there's a lot that comes from that. I'm with you there, big time.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's finish up Reclaim here, because the very last one is M, is the measure and maintain. Certainly, I think that makes sense. You want to talk for just a second about what are we measuring and what are we maintaining here?
Absolutely. So we collected data in the root cause. We want to know if what we're doing is making a difference in the numbers. And it doesn't have to be substantial difference, but there should not be a decrease impact. Your cholesterol shouldn't be going up. Your hemoglobin A1C shouldn't be going up. Your calculated your biological age shouldn't be going up. And it's not going to be, but we're guys. We want to see the numbers. We want to know that we feel better, but we want some sort of data to kind of to show that.
Yep.
The real important thing is, I'm not retesting until 6 months because, it's just useless. I mean, it's just like weighing yourself on a scale 4 times a day. What are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
You can do it once in the morning if you want to, but still, you really just want to space that out because otherwise, that's just becoming obsessive, causing more stress. I mentioned that in my book. It's just if you're optimizing without purpose, then it's just another addiction.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we don't need to go down that road. You want to optimize because you want to be a better person. There's just bigger things than wallowing in your own, say, problems, or in your own default mode network. It's just so liberating when you can just realize that, hey, it's not just about me, it's about everybody around me and my community, and really about my son, my daughter. It's funny, you think the younger generation is just blowing you off. You're just like, I don't speak their language. I don't even know what they're watching. I have no idea what they're doing, but they are watching us.
They are.
They are definitely watching us, and they are taking cues from us. Mm-hmm. And I think it's very incumbent upon guys our age, above 50, 60, to really just say, all right, now we've got to set the tone, because in general, the world is really not headed in where you see people have more manners or more decorum, or are able to have conversations with each other and make them effective, thought-provoking conversations. There's just too much, there's just too much anger and too much superficial thinking going on right now. And I think, obviously, influence of social media and technology plays a big part of that. But, I think we need to get back to the point where, we're really connecting with each other, communicating well, having a good back and forth. It might be dissenting, but, that even makes it fun too. But we need to get to where we're confident enough that it's got to be a safe environment. That takes a little vulnerability on your part. And normally it's like someone that you have to do. But, I'll kind of end it with just there's an old adage that, people, they rarely wave at you, but they always wave back.
That's right.
So if you take the first step to do the first wave, then invariably you'll get that wave back. But if you don't take that first step, then you're just going to walk by each other and not even notice each other. And I think that's not the way that we need to be in society. We need to greet each other, eye contact, nod, and then really become interested in other people. That's kind of the secret sauce.
Yeah, I love it. Look, as men, I believe that we are called to be providers, protectors, leaders, builders. That's masculine energy. But we're also called to serve. We're called to love others. We're called to lead our families. And like you said, a lot of us probably feel irrelevant if you have a traditional masculine kind of ideology. You probably feel irrelevant in this, or maybe just kind of lost given this culture. But knowing your identity, embracing your identity, and people are watching. People are watching. And if you can set the example, if you can be the example, if you are a man today that has values, lives out those values, you are, I hate to say it, but I think you're a 1%er.
1%er.
It seems that way to me anyway, but yeah. All right. Well, Dr. O, as we're wrapping up here, I want to encourage everybody to go out and grab that book. It's called Prime, How to Win the Second Half of Life. You guys definitely check that out. I'll make sure I put a link to that in the show notes here. But do you want to tell folks where they can learn more about you, where they can connect with you, potentially they want to reach out and work with you? Where do you want to send folks?
I think 2 websites. My main website is my name, KennethRoweMD.com. That's kind of my overall, this is what I do, this is who I am. And then also my practice is backinthegamemen.com. So you can take a look, and I go in great detail about that. So those 2, you can also find me on LinkedIn and Instagram, but I also have everything in the book as well. So I think that's always a nice starting point. And I really do appreciate this opportunity. It was a complete pleasure meeting you, Kevin. I mean, this went really smoothly. Yeah. No notes. We're just talking off the cuff because this is what we do. day in and day out, and this is who we are. I really appreciate what you're doing for your community and the world. We're really doing some amazing things. So kudos to you.
Thank you very much. All right, folks, I will throw all of Dr. Rowe's info into the show notes. You guys can find that on whatever app you're listening to this on. And right back at you, Dr. Rowe. I applaud the work you're doing. Just absolutely love your passion for this subject and for talking to men, especially those of us that are in the second half of life here. I just encourage you to keep up the great work.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, men, that's our show for this week. Don't forget to download our free guide titled How to Raise Your Testosterone Naturally. You can find the download link in the show notes for this episode on whatever app you're listening to this podcast on. If you've enjoyed today's show, here are 3 ways you can support us. Number 1, share this episode with a friend. Number 2, make sure to like and follow this show, and please consider leaving us a 5-star review. Number 3, give us a follow over at Instagram. We're at Alpha Edge Army. So that's Alpha Edge Army all run together. I really appreciate you men taking the time to listen. And until next week, stay strong.